Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our fourth Rule Advisory Committee meeting on the OPRD E-assisted bike rules. It is 11 a.m., so we will get started shortly. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, so I may have my camera off at times so I don't subject you to watching me blow my nose. Otherwise, it's good to see everyone else's faces. This is supposed to be our last RAC meeting, and I just wanted to go over the process for today and plans before we really dive in. I just want to say thank you to all of you for participating on this RAC. It was very nice to meet some of you last week at the Oregon Outdoor Recreation Summit. I had the privilege of talking about the e-bike rules in one of the sessions, and there was a lot of really good discussion and engagement with the audience. And I was up there with Metro and U.S. Forest Service and the Deschutes Trail Coalition. So it was really cool to see all of the different perspectives and approaches that we all have. That being said, we are recording and live streaming this meeting on YouTube, and you will be able to watch this meeting along with the others that we've recorded. And all of my nose rubbing and sniffing will be recorded for everyone to see forever. Let's move into our meeting. Just a quick review. We have our rules. I don't think I turned on the Q&A feature to ask questions for this, so please utilize the chat if you need to. We've been having really great engaged discussions and really respectful discourse, so I want to thank everybody for that. There's been some a spectrum of opinions that we've had across the board, and so far all the dialogue has been really good. So I hope to continue that. Today we're going to spend the first 15 or so minutes going back to the rules that we have discussed with the ocean shores and the rest of the parks and trails in our last meeting and the meeting before that. So we can go back and if anyone has any questions or things that they missed that they want to contribute, we'll have that time. And then we'll spend the rest of the time talking about the impact statements that rule advisory committees are required to address. The main one is the fiscal impact statement, where we'll talk about the way some of the rule approaches may have impacts. Because we don't have a specific proposed rule to discuss today, it'll be a little wider, the spectrum of, if we allow all classes of e-bikes everywhere to no classes of e-bikes anywhere, and all the different kinds of impacts that we could potentially see to small businesses and the local economies. And then we'll also tackle the racial equity statement. That's not a requirement for rule advisory committees to address statewide, but it is a practice that we adhere to here at OPRD, where we like to have that discussion with our RACs. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end to wrap up, and then we'll talk about the next little bit of timeline, next steps for the rule itself, and continued way for me to inform all of you as this process continues. Okay, let's dive into our recap from the Ocean Shores meetings. Does anyone have anything that they want to ask, go back to? It can also be beyond just the Ocean Shore meetings to our second meeting where we talked about the general park area and trails rules as well. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. I see a comment. Will, I did see you. I waved, but we were two ships passing. You were very busy. And there were a lot of people at that summit. That was really cool. Okay. Everyone feels like we had enough discussion. Well, this meeting may be less than an hour, and I'll put a little pin in this. We can come back to a recap or discussion as we wrap up the impact statements. Let's get into the first one, the fiscal impact statement. This is for the committee to give staff recommendations on what you perceive that the impacts from our rule changes may drive. So if we will see any significant and adverse impacts for small businesses, or even if there would be positive impacts, it would be good to discuss here. And I know it is hard because we have discussed a number of scenarios. So, and having this discussion will also help us kind of more holistically view the outcome of some of these rules. Does anyone have any opinions on what could potentially happen to local economies, small businesses, or other fiscal impacts statewide if state, and we'll start with this scenario first, if state parks would increase the allowance of e-bikes, e-assisted bikes at state park trails, ocean shores, and other park properties. Go ahead, Dale.
I think, as far as the financial impact for Florence in the area that I live and obviously a lot of the other shores, on the positive side, I think, bringing people to down to the beaches and down to, the trails on e-bikes, I think it's a good positive thing. It allows people like myself that probably would not spend as much time on the beach or on some of the trails. I know I go on my e-bike on areas that there's no way that I could go walking. Just don't have that ability to go that far, and that does have a financial impact on the area personally, and also for having other people come there. I know that when I go to places to ride my bike, I spend money there, and I think that that's good for the local economy, and the people that that are in our Florence e-bike group also go and spend money there, and that's not insignificant over time. I also realize that along with that public activity there also comes, the negative side of it. Of course, there's, no matter how much you try to avoid it, there's always trash, and there's people that don't, follow the rules, and so they have to be, there has to be some way to deal with them. So that's certainly has a somewhat of a financial impact. If there's a ranger that has to address people riding e-bikes, that takes them away from other things that they could be doing. Same thing with just people that work in the areas. So I'd like to again say that I think that there is a both a negative and a positive impact on there. I would hope that it would be more of a positive impact because of the dollars. You just really, from a dollar standpoint, the dollars that it does bring to an area, both in hotels and people using restaurants and buying gas and stopping at the store on their way back home, or just buying things to take on their ride with them. So I think that that's a positive thing, and for us to not allow e-bikes in those areas just because we don't want to, I think is really a short-sighted reason to do that. And I think that people are much more responsible than we think they're going to be. Although there's the bad players everywhere. I think generally speaking, people are more responsible than you think they're going to be. So that's my comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Dale. Go ahead, Elliot.
Morning. I have a couple of comments on impact of fiscal impact because one, I own a bike shop, and two, I live, pardon me, I live right near South Beach State Park here in Newport, and I see the folks that are on e-bikes running from the South Beach State Park, which is a pretty large state park, up into the restaurants like around the Rogue and the Bayfront, and mostly in the South Beach side over here, though. There's no question over the last 3-4 years, I've seen a dramatic increase of people riding their e-bikes from the campsites there into the restaurants and the breweries and all those little restaurant type places there and the aquarium. And they're going there via e-bike versus taking their car or their truck that towed their fifth wheel there. So that's a bonus to our society here in Newport. The other thing is being that I own a bike shop, I sell e-bikes, so that's a financial impact for me personally. And a lot of folks are running, class 2 e-bikes, which have a hub in the back. That's a kind of a hassle to change the flat tire. So we have seen a dramatic increase in people bringing the class 2s in mostly for flat repairs. Now people bring regular 1s and 3s as well, but if they haven't dealt with removing the rear tire with the hub on there, they bring them into us on a more regular basis, and we charge more for that. And so it's been a good thing for me. So I would say in our community overall, it's been a bonus for fiscal impact.
Thank you. Amelia?
Yeah, just adding to that a little bit, excuse me. For the Central Coast, I've just from talking to local surf shops, they actually get quite a few visitors coming through asking, where can I rent an e-bike? So there definitely is demand from tourism and visitors, which circulates all around our coastal economy for riding on the open beaches in the Central Coast. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then I'd like to kind of visit the other side of the spectrum here. We're talking about fiscal impact if we open up the classes of e-bikes and where that they could potentially go. Now, I'd like to have a little bit of discussion on what it looks like if we would limit access from where we are currently with e-bikes, e-assisted bicycles, and potentially even further limit the types of e-bikes that could have access to places that they could go. Anybody want to take a stab at what that would look like? Okay, I see Dale, your hand. Go ahead, Dale, and hopefully others will raise their hands as well.
Okay. I think that I'd really like to encourage the rules to be around speed and what you're doing on your bike, as opposed to the class of an e-bike. People without any experience on e-bikes don't really know how they work that well, and they see people on e-bikes popping wheelies, going down the street and stuff like that on these e-motorcycles, and that's not really what most e-bikes are doing. Even with a more powerful e-bike, let's say you want to go out to the beach. A regular, even though it's a fat tire e-bike and they say they go anywhere, a fat tire e-bike has a hard time getting out to the beach unless they have enough power to kind of get over that little bit of sand. It doesn't mean you're going to use that power all the time on the e-bike on the beach or on the trails to be going fast and to be riding recklessly. It allows you to get over some of the obstacles that you commonly would face. So having it set by class of e-bikes, I think is a little short-sighted. And I'd like to just kind of throw in my hat for that. That's it.
Okay, Dale, I'm not sure I heard the impact statement on that, but I think I can draw from your other statement that it's essentially the opposite there.
Well, I think if you have a limit on a class of e-bikes, obviously you're gonna not encourage those other people to come to wherever they're riding. Let's just call it the beach for right now. And so I think all the businesses are going to lose business because of that, when they don't need to. I think that having them, so any e-bike can come, brings more people, brings more uh, positive benefits. So that's it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kim.
Okay, this probably addresses your prior question more than the current one. But I couldn't find my hand raise thing. So anyway, I'm concerned that adding e-bikes to state parks trails is going to reduce equestrian visitation to the parks, both in terms of visitorship to the horse camps that we have and also just in general horse use. And it's not just good behavior versus bad behavior. That's kind of the side. There's also the question of increased bike presence on the trails makes it a lot less fun for equestrians to ride. Just because they become more crowded.
Thanks. Elise?
Thank you. I would like to build on what Kim just said. I'm concerned about some of the fiscal impacts of e-bikes on beaches and trails because I think that having more powerful bikes, some of those higher classifications of e-bikes, and definitely bikes going at faster speeds, is a deterrent to not only equestrian visitors but pedestrian visitors. I think that there's a possibility that some of the more powerful bikes, especially operating at higher speeds, could degrade wildlife habitat and the ecosystems on the shore and on trails, which would be a deterrent to visitors if some of these habitats are not as pristine and beautiful as they once were. The e-bikes operating at higher classifications and at higher speeds could also be a physical deterrent for pedestrian visitors if they're worried about safety, if there are visitors with small children or visitors tide pooling or looking for agates or something like that on the beach, they might not want bikes zooming past them, especially if those bikes are more powerful or churning up more sand or operating at faster speeds. So if these e-bikes are a deterrent to visitors on the beach, that could hurt small businesses if overall visitation is decreasing, if certain beaches become more of a biker's paradise rather than a pedestrian or equestrian paradise.
Thank you, Elise. Dale, do you have your hand back up or is that from before?
Yeah, I had my hand back up.
All right, go ahead.
And that's kind of the what I was talking about before, is that just because you have a more powerful e-bike does not mean you go faster. You could, but doesn't mean you're going to go faster. So I think that's kind of a misled statement there, just from practical purpose and knowing how people ride their bikes. It just, again, people, just because they have a more powerful bike doesn't mean they go faster and make more sand and cause more of a traffic trouble. It's just not, the rules just don't happen like that. So that's my point. Thanks.
Thanks, Dale. Will?
Yeah, I think in terms of adverse impact, I'm thinking about recreation outfitters that are either near the coast, well, just in general, sorry, not just about the coast, but recreation outfitters who have been either one already operating biking and cycling as a component of what they do, and then those who have been looking into it, particularly when we're talking about, again, about people with disabilities, and then the impact is like there's a segment of our society, 20 to 25% of people who identify as like, and this is just adults, again, who have disabilities, who have one, never had the experience of getting into some of these spaces, and then will continue to not be able to access these spaces if they are getting the chance to use an e-bike as an OPDMD, so an other power-driven mobility device. So that's what I see. I see the further like marginalization and like, pushing to the fringes of people with disabilities if we continue to not allow e-bikes regardless of power and class.
Thanks, Will. John?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of, I guess, iterate with I think Dale and some others were saying, it's that I do think there's a positive impact of more inclusion, and as for the negative impacts of e-bikes compared to other bicycles, there's been a bunch of studies, one done by Volpe and some national studies, really showing that there's limited or negligible impacts from an electric bike versus a normal mountain bike. So I really think they should be kind of looked at similarly, as in where you would want them in parks and trails. So, comparability there, I think is really the kind of impact issue, is being treated similarly as other mountain bikes. And then one thing I wanted to ask this a week ago, but I wasn't able to join. Do these rules cover park managers and park rangers? Because we have heard that the use of e-bikes by those individuals actually make their job more efficient and are able to cover more area to, even on emergencies, respond to people more efficiently. So I'm not sure if that adds to this as a financial impact on how operations happen at the parks, but that should be something of note that we've heard from other land managers and park rangers in other locations outside of Oregon.
Thank you, John. That's a good question, one that hasn't come up yet. Currently, we don't have park rangers enforcing on bike, e-bike or regular, but that's not to say that it could never happen in the future. And Simon and Scott, if you all have any ideas or interest, maybe that's something to pilot in the future. But no, it has not come up yet. But now that you've said it, we'll make sure to note that down. Amanda, go ahead.
I had a question, I guess, before I make a comment. Is the question about whether or not this rule would have a fiscal impact, both, because I think we've talked thus far mostly about like external fiscal impacts, but is this also inclusive of internal fiscal impacts to the agency? No.
No, the statement is specific to small businesses and local communities, but it is a discussion worth having. If you do want to venture down that road, we do have a little bit of time.
But I was just thinking about, the potential cost, and I don't know if there would actually be cost differentials or not, but just costs associated with updating signage around what's allowed and not allowed, and possibly like potentially including the need for some education and like creation of like flyers and materials about how to share space and like the update, what it would necessitate to update all of the things that I'm sure you probably already have, and whether or not there would need to be some sort of like expansion of like ranger hours or time, especially as like these new rules were to come into effect. So that was a little bit where my brain was going, less so on sort of the external fiscal impacts, although I agree with some of the comments that have been made previously that I think like I think that there would be some net positive impacts, fiscal impacts, especially to local businesses and entities that might be able to like rent e-bikes and things like that for use on trails.
Thank you. Our budgetary people would be glad to know that you were thinking of the internal impacts as well. Okay, before we move on to the racial equity statement, are there any other folks that want to chime in on the fiscal impacts? And if you're looking for your raise your hand button, it's down at the bottom center. Sometimes it disappears. You kind of have to hover your mouse over it. Okay. Well, we can move on to the racial equity statement. So this is part of our rule filing, and this is where we're asking you to give us recommendations for the statement that identifies how adopting the rule in the variety of different ways we've talked about it will have an impact and how it will affect racial equity in the state. Anybody want to go first?
Are we looking, sorry, this is Will. Are we looking for a comment here or a full-on statement?
Just your ideas will help morph that into statements. And maybe just to give a little more context, after our staff has the internal meeting to take all of your comments and considerations from all of the meetings into actual proposed changes, we will email all of you the copy of those proposed changes before we take that to the commission so that you have an opportunity to look at it. And so if there needs to be shifts on the fiscal impact and the racial equity statements, we can absolutely make those too. I say this is supposed to be our last meeting because there could be a chance that I tap on all of you one more time to get together and sort of go over the official proposed changes before we open them up for public comment. Dale, thank you for going first each time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think as far as a racial equity statement, if we're trying to limit the kind of e-bikes that can be used anywhere, most e-bikes today are sold as class 2 e-bikes. Again, back to that class system. I would think that the people that are not as financially capable are going to buy bikes that are kind of in the mainstream bikes being class 2 e-bikes, whether they're using it for commuting or whether they're using it as a way to get around if they can't get around. Somebody mentioned what that term is. I don't know what it is. Or maybe just for recreation. I think that by limiting or by saying you can only use class 1 e-bikes or class 2 or whatever, I think that puts some of those people at a disadvantage. So again, I'm not in favor of doing that. So we can open up e-bikes and to more people on more different financial levels. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, and honestly, Dale, thank you for that statement. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. So coming into this space, not just wearing my Metro hat, but also wearing my hat as founding Bike POC PNW. So this is a cycling group of people of color. And in the last 4 years, we've had over or close to 600 people participate in events that we have put on. And so looking at this in terms of through a racial equity lens, I think this is, expanding the e-bike rules is only going to, one, be a boost for Oregon economy, particularly for small businesses who are e-bike dealers who happen to be bike shops who are servicing e-bikes. I mean, I'm already seeing it. I've had a partnership with Visit McMinnville and Cycle Yamhill County where we've put on a bike ride out there the last 2 years and have seen how the increased points of access. So just like as Dale was talking about, if we're talking about different price points, different kinds of bikes, all these things, the increased access to bikes, the kinds of bikes to get outdoors has translated into increased patronage of local small businesses, like whether they're wineries, whether they're other bike shops, whether they're hotels, all of those things across the board. So again, through a racial equity lens, I see this as a good thing, just bringing more opportunity to marginalized communities who have typically seen cycling, just in general, as a place that has been, to put it frankly, like quite gentrified because of the high cost to entry, whether it's around gear, but particularly around the cycling, and then also finding safe places to bicycle.
Thank you, Will. John.
Yeah, just to I guess iterate what Will just said and give 2 points of context. In two states, Colorado and California, which have incentive programs for e-bikes, particularly for communities of color and low-income populations. Those individuals, once they received an e-bike, over about 45% of all of their trips were for recreational purposes. And as we look towards where things are happening in the state, one, we have a very large rebate program that's going to be launching here in Portland that's going to give over 6,000 e-bikes to low income and communities of color. It's expanding marketplace. And so I think when you pair that with access to recreation and recreational needs and wants by those individuals and communities, you want to allow them to use their new bikes or bikes in locations that are for recreational purposes. And so I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
John, thank you for sharing that. I'm curious with the rebate, is there paired education or information people receive with that as well?
Yeah, well, they haven't launched the Portland one, but there's going to be a heavy outreach, education, and safety training component of that. And so, certainly, a lot of it's going to be focused on road safety, but certainly safety as it relates to other users, pedestrians, and where it's proper to bike is going to be part of that conversation. And then I know in other locations around there's a lot of outreach and safety programming towards pairing with rebate programs. So, and for folks, it doesn't necessarily it's going to happen, but there is a bill going through the state for this year that will provide e-bike incentives to people throughout the state, and it will be probably very focused to low income also. So we don't know what that will look like or if it'll pass, but it's just another point that there more people will be riding and using e-bikes throughout the state.
Thanks, John. Any other comments on the racial equity statement before we move on? Okay. Well, I did want to bring up a couple things here. I have noted a few things that we hear over and over, and it is regardless of the I saw your hand there, Kim. I'll come right back to you. Regardless of the outcome of the rules, that state parks has a responsibility to make sure that we are communicating and educating people on these changes. So I would like to warn all of you on this Rules Advisory Committee that even after the rule is adopted, that you may still be getting bugged by me, and I may be asking of you to help us get the word out about the education, about the new rules, finding opportunities to integrate some of our information to existing ones, and just like the example John gave about the rebates, being able to weave in here's proper etiquette for passing pedestrians on the trail, horses on the trail. Here are state parks that will absolutely not let you bring an e-bike or any other bike. This is what a snowy plover looks like, and these are their seasons, and here's where you go to find out more information. Just whatever that looks like. We've been able to learn so much from each other through this these series of meetings, and there's a wealth of information and experts from all of you. So I do hope that you will be open to me continuing to tap on your shoulder for some assistance as we do some of this critical education and outreach, so that the first interaction somebody has when they bring an e-bike to have fun in a state park isn't a negative one with a park ranger because they didn't know the proper etiquette or were operating in a way that wasn't safe for themselves or people around them. That being said, Kim, let's go back. You had your hand up.
Well, it's more of a question. To the extent that the some of our historically disadvantaged communities have less penetration of e-bikes or less ownership of e-bikes than other communities, that would mean that a greater percentage of them potentially in our state parks are using their feet instead of a bike of some sort. So do those people who are enjoying the parks on foot, are they disadvantaged because of the increased presence of e-bikes? It's a question. I don't know I don't know the answer to it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's always the case of maybe there's unforeseen outcomes and impacts to some of the rules that we make. And if it does end up creating more of an issue than we had anticipated, our rules are subject to change. We could go through a process and amend them again. We've done things like that in the past. It's also the position of parks is to balance our resources that we have and the access that people have to said resources and to their enjoyment through that recreation. So we've had this debate hotly during the drone rules advisory committee meetings, and people who love to walk and enjoy the serenity of nature and bird watch tend to not be the biggest advocates for drones. And yet drone users and people who use drones recreationally, that is a form of recreation. They recreate differently. So we have gotten into debates about whose right is it to be there and how to use and enjoy and recreate in that way. And for parks, it's not our position to determine what form of recreation is more valid than another, but to figure out how to balance and provide opportunities in a safe way that doesn't displace people, that doesn't cause harm, and most importantly, for us to seek that balance of our resources as well as people's enjoyment. So that's a good question. Sometimes we do get it wrong, and then we have to admit that we got it wrong and look for ways to fix that. And then as we see these opportunities and people and innovations, like technology comes at us in a way that state parks has never seen before. A lot of people have never seen before. And I hate to admit that bureaucratically we do move slower than I personally would like, but the adaptation of how we make room for these things is a really difficult conversation, and we couldn't do it without all of you here having these discussions. So this, like I said, we'll have to kind of learn as we go and figure it out. You all gave us a lot to think about and consider as staff, and before we open up these proposed changes on what we land on to the public, I will make sure that this RAC gets the copy first. So you'll get an opportunity to look at it. Oh, we've got some hands. I should have started out with that little speech. Okay, go ahead, Dale.
As far as that goes, I think that, you're going to have problems whether you have regular bikers or walkers or e-bikers or anybody. It's going to be, more people out there. And so again, being able to kind of know the rules and being able to speak up about the rules, I think is an important thing. Also, we need to think about, some of the people with mobility issues. Maybe they can't ride a bike really, but they could ride an e-bike and they could go out and see some of the beauties that we have available through some of the state parks and the beaches and things like that. Just because they have that electric assistance on there. So I think that that's going to be something, as far as, and I put a text up there for Kim as far as riding, as far as horses, if we know, what we can do to make it easier to be around other people, to be around other animals, I think that helps. People are pretty familiar with dogs on the trail, but they're not too really familiar with horses on the trail. And it's just not that they don't care, it's just they don't know. And so I think being able to share information will help everybody on that. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thanks, Dale. Will?
Yeah, and then we're in the parking lot space right now, just to make some final comments. Okay, perfect. I
Yep.
think the last thing that I want to, even as we move forward with this, I still want to note that I think rather than a blanket e-bike policy, that we really look at, and again, I'm referring to OPDMD and accessibility and how it relates to the disability community, that we look at where these bikes are being ridden more than anything else within each park. And it's going to be more labor intensive to determine those things, but I think that's going to do us a lot better in the long run with respect to cutting down on, one, user conflicts, two, also making sure that we're preserving the natural resources and spaces, and yeah, and three, just overall like health of the park that we are going to be operating bikes in.
Thanks, Will. Amelia?
I think Will and Dale mostly covered what I was going to say, but I guess I just wanted to mention that the open beaches may provide a little bit more space. So I like the way that it's phrased, that specific areas could be open or closed to e-bikes, because we might see less conflicts and more beach use recreationally, which I think is a goal for everybody to get along and have more recreation. So I just wanted to go back and separate those two things a little bit. I can't speak for trails, but beach use, I do think there's space for e-bikes in many places. Thank you.
Thanks, Amelia. Okay, we have about 15, 16 minutes left of our allotted time. Does anyone have any closing comments? I'd be curious to see what's next. So let's talk about that. Today is December 10th, and with the holidays and everything coming up, we have our internal staff work group meeting scheduled for January. And then what will happen during that meeting is everyone should be getting all of the links to these meetings, the notes, the compilations of the discussions that we've had here, and our staff will sit down and create the proposed changes. Once that's done, we'll email you all a copy. Depending on how it shakes out, we'll see if we can do feedback from you by email or if it makes sense to potentially schedule another meeting. I know it's kind of hard during that New Year time moving in. The commission meeting is in February. We would like to get it prepared to ask the commission for permission to open these rules for public comment in February. So between January and February, early February, you may get another note from me. So if I do ask for email comments, I would very much appreciate them from you. I know it's a busy time. If we can squeeze in a meeting, that would be great. So with that said, the official duties of this RAC and of all of you are over. But if you have any questions between now and when truly throughout the whole rulemaking process. So if the committee or the commission, I'm sorry, I'm getting all mixed up now. If the the commission gives us approval to open the rules for public comment, we will also be doing public hearings, probably virtual for all of them so that we can maximize attendance. We may do one in person. We'll look at some of the locations, and then throughout the public comment period, we'll be able to receive people's public comments. We'll organize them, and then we'll put that in a report. So by the April, maybe the June commission meeting, we will have it wrapped up with changes and back to the commission for their adoption. They could then vote to adopt the rule. They could say that maybe it needs more work, and they could send it back to us to reform another RAC and start the process over. There's a variety of different options, but optimistically, we'd like to have it all buttoned up with the rules adopted by the April commission meeting. If we need a delay, it would happen in June. And what would follow is the education and outreach portion of the rule. And because it's going to be impact statewide, we'll have to figure out a full campaign for that. And like I said, there may be a lot of you that I one more time tap on your shoulder to help with some of those efforts. Any questions on process or timeline? Okay. Well, we'll end the meeting here. Thank you all so much. I've been so grateful for all of your participation throughout. You all know how to contact me if you have any further questions. I hope to see your names and people that you know throughout the public comment process and some more involvement from you in the future. Have a wonderful holiday season. Everyone be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks. You too, Joe.
Bye.